They called me crazy for taking my daughter from her mother, but I saved her. My name is Gustavo. I'm 37 years old, and until recently I thought I was just another ordinary guy trying to get through life. I work as a systems analyst, and a few years ago my routine consisted mainly of the office, traffic, and my home, where I lived with my wife Vanessa and our daughter Sul. We got married rather quickly, on an emotional impulse that I only realized later. During our 4 years of marriage, we had good moments, yes, but also many difficult silences, unresolved arguments, and separations that seemed irreversible. The only thing that always kept me close was Sul. Since she was born, it was as if everything in me shifted. She became my center, my compass, my reason. Even when the marriage was already falling apart, I clung to the idea that keeping the family together would be better for her. When we decided to divorce, it was a seemingly smooth process. We signed the papers promising to maintain joint custody and prioritize Sol's well-being above all else. I believed her. I wanted to trust Vanessa to maintain her balance. She seemed as determined to move forward peacefully as I was. But a few months later, things started to go off the rails. First, there were the delays in returning Sol. Then came the ignored calls, the empty apologies, and the times my daughter would return silent, scared, with dark circles under her eyes. At first, I thought it was just an adjustment, period. But something inside me told me it wasn't normal, that there was something wrong with this new environment Vanessa was offering. That's when I met Bruno. The first time I saw this man, Sul was holding on tightly to my leg, as if she didn't want to go back to her mother's house. Bruno appeared at the gate, looking like he'd just gotten out of a bar fight. Red eyes, a strong smell of alcohol, and a sidelong glance that made me freeze. He didn't even try to hide his arrogance, and worst of all, Vanessa seemed numb. She laughed at his rude remarks as if they were jokes. That day I left with a lump in my throat, Sul in the back seat of the car asking if he could spend more time with me. That broke me. I felt something had to be done. But how could I prove my daughter was at risk without seeming like I just wanted to take the child away from her mother? The weeks passed, and things only got worse. Sul began to show fear, nightmares at night, sudden crying spells, fear of loud noises. I took her to a child psychologist who confirmed she was suffering from trauma, and yet every time I tried to talk to Vanessa, she accused me of exaggerating. She said I was trying to manipulate the situation. One day, after a weekend visit, my daughter showed up with a bruise on her arm. She said she fell, but her eyes said otherwise. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started recording everything: schedules, photos, audio recordings, reports from school. I went to the public defender's office, sought guidance, and got the contact information for Dr. Leandro Couto, a lawyer with a reputation for being relentless in custody cases when the child's well-being was at stake. With Dr. Leandro's help, I filed a lawsuit requesting temporary custody and restricted visitation. Vanessa reacted as I'd imagined, with screams, threats, fake tears, and messages telling me I was a monster for trying to take a daughter away from her mother. But this time, I didn't give in. I fought to the end. I presented evidence, psychological reports, and statements from the school that described changes in Sol's behavior. Vanessa then did what I feared. She began using Sul as emotional currency. She didn't show up on the agreed-upon days, fabricated illnesses, and forced the girl to record videos saying she missed her mother, as if I were preventing contact. It was a cold war that ate away at me. The worst part, for me, was seeing my daughter in the middle of it all. I cried in secret, afraid to show weakness. I tried to keep the house light, meals fun, outings normal, but it was hard. At night, when she slept, I broke down. I wondered if I was doing the right thing. I was afraid I was alienating her, even though I knew I wasn't. The case dragged on, and at each hearing it was a psychological game. Vanessa played the victim, crying in front of the judge, saying she was being attacked. And even with the evidence, there were still those who thought it was just a couple's fight. It hurt. It was like fighting an invisible enemy, hiding behind appearances and emotional manipulation. The turning point began when we managed to include a formal complaint from neighbors in the case. They reported hearing violent fights between Vanessa and Bruno, including Sol yelling at them to stop. The judge, Dr. Carolina Mendez, who had been neutral until then, began to look at the case more severely. She ordered a technical visit from the social services team. And that's when everything came to light. Sol's accounts, the conditions of the house, Bruno's history of substance use. It was a shock even for me. Knowing my daughter had been in that environment for so long filled me with guilt. How had I not seen it before? How had I let this happen? It was at that moment that I nearly broke down. I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and helplessness. I wanted to give up, to run away, to drop everything and start over somewhere else. But then I looked at Sul. She was sleeping with her arm thrown over the pillow, breathing peacefully, and that's when I understood I couldn't give up, not for myself, but for her. She needed me whole, present, strong. That's when I decided I would go all the way. That even if it cost me my emotional health, I wouldn't let her grow up thinking that was love, that was normal. It was my responsibility to break the cycle, and I was willing to pay the price. After the judge granted temporary custody and suspended Vanessa's visits pending a further psychological evaluation, I saw my daughter truly smile for the first time in months. It was a light, free smile, a smile that seemed to say, "I'm safe now." It gave me a peace I'd forgotten existed. At the same time, it brought me a new burden. How to rebuild her trust in the world, how to teach her that not every maternal figure hurts, that not all affection is unstable. I was afraid of being insufficient. I never prepared myself to be a full-time father. I had to relearn how to be everything. To her, support, affection, security, and routine. These were intense days, filled with learning and rediscovering our relationship. Meanwhile, Vanessa tried to change the narrative. She began posting on social media that she was a victim of parental alienation, that I was controlling and wanted to alienate her daughter. I received offensive messages from some mutual friends who didn't even know the details. They said I was using the system for revenge. I had to shield myself. I distanced myself from certain people, silenced groups, stopped trying to justify myself. Leandro always reminded me, those who speak the truth don't need to shout. Let the facts speak for you. And that's what I did. I kept my focus on Sul, her school, her therapy, the small daily achievements, and little by little she began to blossom again. One thing that really struck me was when the psychologist called me in and said, "Sol is starting to trust the world again, and that's thanks to your perseverance." That moved me in a way I can't explain. We're always wondering if we're doing the right thing, if we'll make it, if the love we give is enough. And hearing that I was being a secure foundation for my daughter gave me strength. But I also felt fear. What if Vanessa managed to reverse everything? What if she manipulated the system as she had already been trying to do? That's why I kept everything documented, strictly followed every court order, and made a point of avoiding provocations, because any slip-up on my part would be used against me. The case dragged on for over a year. There were expert examinations, reports, and statements, and at each stage, new attempts at emotional manipulation. Vanessa even presented herself completely differently to the social worker, saying she was clean, that her relationship with Bruno was over, that it was just a bad phase. But contradictions surfaced. Neighbors continued to report yelling and fighting, and Sul herself, with her childish manner, recounted situations in detail that left no doubt about what was going on there. The judge then ordered the end of unsupervised visitation rights. and Bruno began to be criminally investigated. That seemed like the beginning of a turning point. Internally, I was exhausted. My body began to show signs of collapse. Insomnia, headaches, anxiety attacks. I had to seek psychological help for myself too. I didn't want to take anything out on Sul. I knew she needed a present, yet healthy father. And I couldn't be that if I was dragging myself along. It was a difficult few months, but little by little I came to understand that asking for help didn't make me weak. On the contrary, it made me stronger for her. I began to walk more lightly, even with the weight of responsibility. Sul felt it. She started sleeping better, started drawing again, humming in the bath. Signs that she was, little by little, becoming a child again. One day, while we were having breakfast, she looked at me and said, "Daddy, this is my real home, right?" That broke me, because then I saw that, for her, home wasn't just a place. It was where she felt protected, seen, loved. And I understood I'd made the right choice. It wasn't a war of ego, nor a dispute over ownership. It was for her emotional health, her safety, her future. And if in the midst of all this I had to rebuild myself, I would. Because there's nothing more important to a father than seeing his daughter grow up free from fear. When the final ruling came down, granting me sole custody and supervised visitation with my mother, I cried for almost half an hour. It wasn't euphoric happiness. It was tears of relief, of liberation, of the end of a cycle of constant pain and tension. Leandro hugged me and said, "You won by being fair." And that was it. I didn't need to yell, I didn't need to lie, I just needed to be consistent, present, attentive and strong. Justice may be slow, but when well-founded, it does its job. And that day, I knew I had done the best for Sul. Today, my daughter continues to receive psychological counseling, but the progress is remarkable. She's more confident, relaxed, and curious. We have our rituals, movies on Sundays, walks in the park, drawing afternoons. I've learned to appreciate the details, the spontaneous hug, the whispered, "I love you," before bed, the way she holds my hand on the street. There are still wounds, of course, but now they're healing wounds. And I, too, continue to heal. I've learned that being a father isn't just about being there when everything is going well, but especially when everything seems to be falling apart. And it's in this chaos that we discover what we're truly made of. I get a lot of questions from people going through something similar and wondering if it's worth the fight. The answer is simple, but not easy. It is. But it's a tough fight, often lonely, and full of emotional pitfalls. You need to be prepared to be called overbearing, controlling, even an enemy. People romanticize shared custody, thinking it's just about following what's written on paper. But when the other side doesn't comply, when the child is exposed to chaos, the paperwork isn't enough. It takes courage to go against the flow, to back up the decision, and most importantly, to endure the consequences without losing your humanity along the way. I never imagined I would go through such a long, emotionally exhausting process. The justice system in Brazil is slow and sometimes seems blind, but I was fortunate to encounter serious professionals like Dr. Leandro and Dr. Carolina, people who understood that this wasn't a dispute between adults, but rather the protection of a child. That made all the difference. Still, the greatest burden fell on me. For months, I lived on autopilot, in survival mode. Only those who have been through a lawsuit involving children understand how much it can drain our energy. Despite everything, I don't hate Vanessa. I feel sad. She lost herself in bad choices, in a toxic relationship that affected not only her, but also our daughter. I truly hope she seeks help, gets treatment, and finds herself again. Even though the courts have ordered supervised visits, Sul still has the right to spend time with her mother, and I support that as long as it's safe. I don't want to erase her mother from her life. I just want to ensure she never again feels fear where she should find comfort. This experience taught me a lot about myself. I thought I was an ordinary, quiet guy, maybe even weak in some ways, but today I see that I was strong. Strong for not giving up when everything inside me told me to run. Strong for facing dirty looks, false accusations, and sleepless nights. And most of all, strong for being a constant presence in my daughter's life, even when it would have been easier to walk away. I discovered a version of myself I never knew. A version that will keep fighting, even when the war seems lost. Soul taught me more than any book, course, or therapist. She taught me that resilience isn't about silently enduring everything, but rather about knowing when to say enough is enough and when to ask for support. That affection heals, but that constancy builds. Today, I see in her a stronger, more self-aware child, and that gives me hope. Hope that she will grow up knowing she deserves love, respect, and peace. And that when someone tries to take that away from her, she will know how to recognize it, because she saw it at home, because she felt it in her father. If you're reading this and feeling alone, disbelieved and powerless, I want to tell you something. You're not alone. It may seem like the world is against you, that no one understands your pain, that every effort is in vain, but it's not. Every step you take toward truth, justice, and the protection of those you love counts, even when no one sees it, even when no one thanks you. And one day, this struggle will blossom into someone who looks at you and says, "This is my true home." And that's worth more than any legal victory. It's worth your soul. Today, I continue living one day at a time. My routine with Soul has given me purpose. Of course, there are still fears, uncertainties, and wounds that take time to heal. But now I know I'm capable of protecting, loving, and rebuilding. I've changed my life plans, adjusted my priorities, and found new meaning in being a father. Not the kind of father you see on weekends, but the kind of father who's there for the fever in the wee hours, for homework, for school parties, for hugs when the world is scary. And it's in this daily routine that true overcoming lies. I end this story with gratitude. Gratitude for having listened to my instincts when something didn't feel right. Gratitude for every professional who stood by me. And above all, gratitude for having Soul in my life. She is the light that guided me through the darkest days. My daughter, my love, my courage. No matter how many battles lie ahead, I have already won the most important one, proving to myself that a father's love can be the most powerful force there is, and no one can take that away from me. Not time, not pain, not injustice.